Technology, diversity, wine, the redwoods, and everything in between. Welcome to the Northern California Bay Area, and one show takes you inside the real estate that makes it all happen. This is By the Bay.
Hey everyone, welcome back to By the Bay. Today we are with Richard and John from the City Country Group at Vanguard. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really, so long story short is we've been working together for some time, but this is the first time we've actually met in person because of all COVID stuff. So why don't you tell me how we got here?
We sold a house, you did the loan.
That's the long and short of it, for sure. How long have you been doing real estate, and how did you get to building your team? Because you are the, I'll say it, you're the dominant force. You are the premier group in the Russian River area.
Cool.
And at least that's my opinion. I think the data also supports that. So how did you get to this point?
So just the Russian River.
Right.
We were walking to the library one day and we saw coming soon sign. And John opened the office. That was back in
2005.
2004.
2004.
Yeah. So it's been a good run, you
Okay.
know, like it was interesting to kind of shake that market up back in 2004.
Okay.
It was kind of completely different. We'd had a place in San Francisco that we also had a home in Guerneville at that time going back and forth, which is the library part, bringing our library book back from our weekend up there. And we just both really loved real estate, and I had my license at that time. And so, yeah, cut my teeth in that office, you know, opened it in 2000, and it actually opened in 2005. And our client base is very similar to us. Like they typically are from San Francisco or the greater Bay Area, including the South Bay, and they're looking for someplace in the woods and nature to kind of mix things up.
Like literally your story, how
Exactly.
you got there,
Yeah.
Which
is
made it
who you sell. I mean,
so
it
easy.
seems so organic and
Totally.
like a good fit.
Yeah. So we just did all the basic things, right? There were no open houses at that time. You know, just starting from scratch with, you know, welcoming potential buyers on the weekend when they were up there visiting. And it just sort of took off, really.
Nice.
Yeah, it's good.
Very cool. Yeah. So that market is very unique, right? So very unique properties, lots of different communities.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us an overview, like what's happening in the Guerneville, Russian River market today?
It's pretty much a very consistent, most of the buyers come from the city,
Okay.
or the Bay Area, second home market. Most of them are really sophisticated in real estate already. You know, they own property, and they're looking for a second home. Sometimes transitioning into this will be a retirement place. Sometimes it's going to be a vacation rental, weekend place, gathering place. But it's having the other place, urban, you know, compact, noisy, congested, and something a little more rural. Past couple of years, you know, with work from home, a lot of folks who weren't tied to a 9-to-5 sort of, I have to go into work.
Right.
So able to work remotely. And I think a lot of folks who didn't have that saw their friends, because everybody was on Zoom, and it was, gosh, you're sitting in your backyard having a barbecue and you're working.
Right.
And I'm stuck in my apartment. I don't even have a balcony. I want that.
That kind of migration, so I see that there's a lot of folks from the South Bay especially that either moved to Petaluma, because this is where we are sitting today, and one of the core markets I work in, and they moved to Petaluma because it's kind of the last place that you can live and still commute to the city. Any further north is just too far of a commute.
Right.
And then there's like the other option is if you're going to keep your primary residence in the city or in the South Bay, is you go to the Russian River and you buy a second home there, and you can split your time depending on the season and what your needs are for meetings and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think there's a radius that feels comfortable that
Right.
we all sort of read about in the industry, like at about an hour and a half. It's very accessible, an hour and a half to 2 hours, you know, seems like it is a easy thing to throw a small bag in the back of your car and just head out, right?
Right.
It doesn't require a lot of commitment or planning. And I think, us being inside that zone has really been a benefit. But what's interesting over the years, since 2004 or 5 to where we're at now, we've always been considered just a little bit too far out for real commuting, right? Which has really kept our property values in the past, I think, one of the most affordable places in Sonoma County to consider, because we don't have really the direct thoroughfares to get back, and people didn't commute from there to a job necessarily. So it really kept it as a second home market. Then with COVID and the sort of reorganization of how people relate to work, how often they're going in, and the probability that a lot of people don't actually have to go to work, they have good internet access every 5 days a week. It might only be 2. Right. That really switched up the dynamic. And I think what we saw in our property values for 2020, 2021, and even to some degree really for this year, is that the foundation is different for the base property values. They have gone up.
So speaking of that, so we're sitting here in the middle of 2022, and so can you kind of go back in time? We were talking before we started recording. I wish we had a time capsule to go back to January or December or November of last year and go, okay, here's the kind of that mile marker, and where are we now in relation to then? Interest rates are high, inflation 9.1% just was released. Talk to me about what's the trend in that kind of 1 to 2 year scope?
Yeah, so interest rates are higher,
right? But
they're not high.
Good. That's a good designation for sure. Okay.
I had a mortgage in 1981 that was 19%. Now that's high.
The context, I think, is important.
Yeah.
You have people who, I had a client talking to yesterday that they're like, I'm at 2.75%. The idea of buying a new house that's more expensive at 5% seems daunting. And I'm like, well, let's look at the history here. That's still a pretty affordable interest rate, but compared to 2.75, it's a big difference. But I think if you're coming from a place where you had 19% or 12 or even 8, that 5 or 6 is still pretty reasonable.
Historic average for rates, I think, is about 6%.
About 6%, yeah.
So yeah, somebody who's got a 2.5%, 2.75% mortgage, a little bit of golden handcuffs.
Yeah.
They're not going to sell or move just because if I'm bored. There's going to have to be a life change, an extra, family member, job change, downsize. It's something that's really compelling to give up the mortgage, because they're not giving up the house. They're giving up the mortgage. And their folks will be tied to that.
That's super insightful, the giving up the mortgage idea. Hey, we don't love the house necessarily. It's a good house, but we don't really give up the mortgage.
Flip side?
Yeah.
When I was coming off of historic 9% rates in the 80s, and I got approved for 6%, I was looking to buy a house, and I was buying the mortgage. And I was looking at houses I didn't even like. I just wanted that low rate, which we're not even at that right now. We're well below that. So we're seeing people shift a little bit, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah, for sure.
30-year fixed, when it was less than an adjustable, everybody got a 30-year fix.
Right.
So there's been a little shift in gears to look back at 5, 7, 10-year ARMs, which is historically, people move that often, most of the time.
Exactly right. I mean, most of the time they transact on their home within 5 to 6 years, which is kind of why they make a 7-year ARM, right? So,
and if they don't, there's going to be an opportunity to refinance, because rates swing both ways, and with really high inflation right now, we're seeing them up, they'll tick back down.
I agree with you, and I think the economists out there also agree. So we're seeing a strategy of using an ARM at a length that you're comfortable with, 5, 7, 10, right? Not seeing a lot of 3, but 5, 7, 10-year ARMs, and looking at a refinance opportunity when inflation calms down, and eventually it will, it's a cyclical thing, and I think we'll see rates back down at some point, and then we'll refinance all those people out of those adjustable rates into a long-term fixed and take advantage of the market conditions. So kind of going back to the original question is, what's the trend? Because I'm seeing housing values continue to appreciate regardless of the interest rates.
True. So like an interesting stat is right now, today, at the Russian River, which encompasses Forestville to Jenner, sort of, So we have 59 homes on the market. That's coming soon and active. So that is a really, really small number. Like we're usually, this time of year, this is the height of our season, so we would typically be at 110, 120.
So half the inventory.
We're at 59, right? Excuse me, we're at 49, I apologize. So 49 to a ratio of 110 to 120 that we would typically have, 49. So, that in itself is sort of creating its own drive, but at the same time, we've gone through most recently, and this isn't a reflection back for a year ago, but really a most recent month to 6 week kind of look back. We had a period in which buyers just stopped, I think, with the negative news and the higher interest rates and deer in the headlights, right? So in how that translates, and we do a lot of listings, so it's interesting to see different price points performing differently in terms of the number of offers that we'd receive. If we look back a year ago at this time, it was the classic sort of 10 to 12 offers per listing. If you had a sort of reasonable strategy on list price, you could expect 8, 10, 12 offers, and the market really sort of
right.
let it ride as high as any one buyer was willing to, put all their cards on the table for that. That's not there any longer.
Okay.
So there's still multiple offers, but I would say that whole heated up temperature is not there. Buyers have a lot more room for negotiation in terms of having contingencies now, where that was not a thing a year ago.
That was a real big concern of mine, looking at
no
contingencies, no loan, no appraisal, no physical inspection. It's that makes you really uncomfortable for the buyer. And we have a fiduciary duty to these people, and it's man, that makes me. But if you had any of it, your offer wasn't looked at.
Yeah,
so it's nice to know that we're swinging back somewhat to be more in a
little bit more balanced. Which is
market.
good. It's good all around because, of course, a seller loves a non-contingent offer, but the risk is both ways.
Right.
If buyers don't have time to consider what they're doing, it's not good for the seller either.
Right. That's true.
You want a competitive, fair price, but not it's a one-way street, and the fact that buyers had to make offers sometimes without even time to think about it.
Right.
House hit the market. If there wasn't an offer date to slow it down, which frequently there was, but we saw houses hit the market and sell the same day. There's no way.
Yeah, there's no balance there, right?
Yeah. So it's a good thing. And I think for our buyers, that we work with, it really is, it's relationships, that we have with other agents around identifying what the seller's objective for. If our buyer looks at a property and says, this is it. There's a varying degree. Some buyers say, this would be great. I've got a budget. I've got a price in mind. It would be great to get it at this price. That's sort of one strategy with the seller and the seller's agent. Then there's, if a buyer says, I have to have this, right, which is a different kind of approach to, it's the one and only property that will fit their needs, then it's a different approach to, kind of protect them a little bit around that sentiment and make sure that we're able to still negotiate for them in a way that stays in bounds, right? Yeah. That, we just don't go crazy.
I think it makes a lot of sense, and it's a healthier place to be in the market. So your sellers, you said you do a lot of listings, so how are they absorbing this news, and how is that going is it motivating sellers to come to market? Because there's not a lot of inventory.
Yeah, I think the opposite. And I don't think it's the shift in the market. People really valued their homes during the past couple of years.
Sure.
And we saw right at the beginning of COVID, people who were thinking of selling, who made a complete U-turn right on the spot from I'm not using that house to I probably will. So that led to the constriction in availability at the same time as more people wanted to buy.
That's so interesting, right? So if you live in San Francisco, you have the house in the river, and you're locked down, you can go to your other house. So the utilization rate wonder how that impacted the local economy up there in terms of the restaurants and the stores and the shops.
It was great. I mean, and we literally had houses in the beginning of 2020. We had them signed. They were listings to come out in spring. A good number, like I'm saying, like 6, 7 folks basically said in March and April, we're changing course. Like, I know we fully intended to sell that house, but we absolutely see it differently now. Like,
Right.
that we really need and want that. And
It makes total sense.
Yeah.
It makes total sense.
Yeah. So we live in Jenner,
Okay.
and pre-pandemic, it was sort of way out there. Now it's a traffic jam constantly for a little.
every day.
All it is
Yeah.
it's not really even a town. It's a bend in the road.
Yeah, that's
it's
pretty
park
incredible.
solid, yeah.
Right? That's pretty incredible. Just how that kind of
fresh air.
it completely changed.
And
how
it's
people
also
look at the
fires
space.
too. I think, a lot of people really experienced, consecutive days in the past few years, in addition to COVID. I think air quality has become a thing where people do want to feel like they have a place to go that is safe, and that the perception that they've got this switch up location that is available to them has become a really meaningful thing. And as I was saying before we came on, watching families at open house, go through, and I can just see in their body language, they're evaluating the space with a completely different mindset. It's not about how great this will be for a barbecue. It's also about how they would have homeschooling
Right.
in that location.
How do we exist only in this house if this is
if
where
we have to
be?
go there again, right? And
That's
it's a
fascinating.
completely different visual that I'm watching play out in front of me. So it's interesting, how
That's
much
super cool.
psychology changes around.
And you can physically feel that, or
totally,
when they're in the space.
yeah.
One trend I noticed that is tied to interest rates. A year ago, it seemed like, and I'm exaggerating, but it seemed like every offer was a cash offer.
Right.
There was lots of cash. This year, those same people are getting loans. And I think they don't want to touch their stocks,
Right.
because the market's devalued. And they're looking at where are interest rates going to go, and let's lock it in now, knowing that if they drop, I can refi. If they go up, I'm still
protected,
getting money.
right.
It's free money. It's
Right.
below the rate of inflation right now. You can borrow for 6, but inflation's at 9.
Right.
And that's not a hard
economics of
decision.
that. Right. That
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. Yeah, especially if you're in the tech and you work for one of the major tech companies and your stock has taken a 30% haircut this year.
Right.
Like, you don't want to sell that. You're going to
Now's the time to hold that
hold
one.
on to that. Yeah. It's that overall economic and financial strategy, I think, is something that's often overlooked. I always tell people there's plenty of people out there that can make you a loan. You want someone who's actually going to analyze these types of situations and go, how do we set you up for success, not only for today, but in your long-term financial plan? And how does this mortgage or debt that you're taking on play into that? It's not a conversation that most people in our industry are having. So it's really refreshing to hear that you're thinking about these things for your clients, and speaks to the history that you have working with those high net worth and second home buyers that are coming from the tech world. So that's really cool. Your sellers, where are they going? What's the trend there?
If they are local, lived in the Russian River all their life, they're probably leaving the area. If they are more the second home folks, they just have a different plan for right now. So it may be they've outgrown the house at the river. It worked as a second home.
Sure.
But now that it's more part-time, they want something bigger or different location than where they're at right now. Really, you were going to say
I was going to say, we have when I'm thinking about the ones that we most recently have, I mean, honestly, they are the classic. We've got unfortunately death, divorce. The standards that really are the basic for
life change.
life change.
Right.
Yeah, we have people.
Retirement.
Sure.
Retirement.
Is there anyone that's selling just like we didn't utilize the house as much as we thought we would, and we are taking advantage of the market conditions and selling before we think that there might be?
We have a client right now who's held on to his house. Well, there's a couple. They've held on to their house for 3 or 4 years just because they loved the house. We sold it to them 15 years ago, and they barely used it for the last 5.
Right.
They moved to a completely different area out of the Bay Area.
I would say retirement's a big deal. So, we have clients who are in like, very large, beautiful homes up there, and they're just too big, like 4-bedroom house that's 2,300 square feet, and they're they're retirement age. So it's kind of, something smaller is really appropriate.
Well, and that's a perfect house maybe for that tech person in Silicon Valley that needs that space because they've got a young family, or they're going to,
totally.
multi-generation's going to come use it.
We have one client who's selling her house because it's too much to maintain, and the buyers are downsizing, and it's the perfect
amount of maintenance
replacement for. They had major acreage.
Got it.
So now instead of acres, they've got half an acre.
And of course, we've got 1031 exchange people.
Right.
Yeah, and I think last year for sure we were at more of more of what everyone considered to be sort of an apex in the market. So there were obviously a number of sellers during that period of time who felt that was a good time in the cycle of real estate.
Sure.
They kind of couldn't believe.
We can get this for that? You're telling me that you give me this number?
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah, right. And they calls like, I said I would never sell this house, but I'm getting the feeling like the neighbor's house just sold for 1.2, and like, I never thought anything would start with a 1 kind of conversation. And it's like there's so much I could do with that money.
Right.
That I never thought it would ever be like that. Right. So
I try to stay up on this topic, but you are the experts in the area. So tell me about the vacation rental moratorium. Where does that stand today, and how does that impact like the short-term rental, Airbnb, that sort of thing?
So vacation rental permits are issued to the owner. They don't travel with the house. So when a house sells, if it is a rental, the permit falls off. County's not issuing permits currently. They've sort of bumped it out into next year with some discussion that it could happen sooner, but they're not committed to that. Looking at how does it affect neighborhoods, how does it affect affordability, so they're studying it. Right now, the unincorporated county, because each incorporated towns have their own rules that supersede. Unincorporated county, you can't get a permit, which is anything that's 29 days or less. You can still rent your house for more than a month.
Month-long rentals, someone wants to rent it out for the summer.
We have several clients who are doing that, and they don't have permits. They'd get them if they could. So they're using the house in
month-long increments.
Well, no, they can use it for a weekend if they want, but they're renting it and using it in between a month rental. That's not as fluid as Airbnb, but still a doable way, especially for folks who travel a lot, which is opening up again. So if they're going to go to Europe for a month and they're not going to use the house, some people just don't like it to sit empty.
Yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword when I think about it, right? Obviously, you want to have affordable housing for people who live locally. Totally get that. We don't want every single house to be a short-term rental, right? But at the same time, when people travel, they spend money. And you want them to eat at the restaurants and buy at the shops and buy art and do all the things that they do when they go and they're on vacation.
Yeah.
So the local economy benefits from having short-term rentals, having those people come in and out. But it's this balance between that and affordable housing for people who...
Of course, houses that are really affordable are probably not the type of house that would be a short-term rental anyway.
That's a good point.
Because everybody wants the same thing. A little bit of sun, a little bit of privacy, no road noise, no visible neighbors, right? And if it had a pool, if it had a pool or was on the river, it'd be even better. So those houses aren't really in that necessarily anyway in that.
That's something that's always existed in our market. You have the houses that really don't resonate as a weekend house, and the houses that are much more likely to be a first-time buyer or a full-time owner,
Right.
because it's got a couple of compromises. People buying second homes, they're buying lifestyle, not shelter, so they don't need to buy. And they'll pass by a house if it's on a busy street, doesn't get enough sun, doesn't have outdoor space or a deck. When you're buying shelter, you really play off all of the factors, including affordability
Right.
and all the things you'd like to have versus the things you have to have.
Sounds like the hypothesis is that the moratorium doesn't help affordable housing. Building more houses probably helps affordable housing.
Yeah, I think that's
a sad fact right now. We lost in the past few years about 6,000 houses in Sonoma County.
Right.
We weren't building that many before that loss. We're still at a shortfall.
I read a statistic, and I'll have to find it, and we'll put it in the notes here. But something to the extent of we're maybe overbuilding housing by like 1 million houses a year, but we're short overall by like 8 million houses that we should have built in past years as a result of 2008 and just no one building anything. So even if that's true, like we still need to have an oversupply for 8 years before we actually catch up with where we should be today.
Right. Yeah.
So are we overbuilding? Yes, but we're catching up on the housing stock that was never built, and then we can kind of balance out that find that equilibrium going forward. But the reality is there's just not enough housing stock, especially in Sonoma County, where we are in Petaluma. We have an urban growth boundary, so we can't go out after a certain point. So everything has to be infill projects, and anyway, it's a whole affordable housing is just such a hard topic. And I understand wanting to preserve character and keeping the soul of the community and not building a 40-story apartment building in downtown Guerneville. Like that just wouldn't fit.
Right.
But at the same point,
It'd be pretty impressive.
right, it would be. But
It'd be the Salesforce Tower of the unincorporated county.
probably not. Yeah, so it would change the skyline for sure. But there's got to be a balance. There has to be a balance. So, so kind of wrapping up here. So some advice that you have for someone who's looking to buy in your market. What should they be thinking about? What should they be doing?
They should participate. So, the thing that I see most often, like our numbers for the total number of, disclosure packages out all look the same as they did, a couple months ago. What's different is the number of buyers who are actually writing. Yeah, so if you look at your stats and you think, oh, well, there's 20 disclosure packages out and 5 downloads and agents calling you left and right, but in the end, you only get 1 or 2 offers, that's a real change, right? And we've been successful really recently in, surprisingly, making a call on the day of the offer and saying, our folks are going to write at or a little bit above asking, but let us know if you're getting 100,000 over, because if you don't, we're here to write. And in the last 2 cases, we've gotten the call, write the offer. And so that's told me, if you're a buyer and it works for you, write the offer that's going to work for you. Let us negotiate for you, if it's not going to fly out of the gate. But to participate is the thing, because I think many buyers feel like there's no point. There's going to be competition. I don't want to be in competition. There's this sentiment around
Go ahead and write the offer.
it getting out of control.
Right.
And it's like, it really can be.
Write the offer for what you're willing to pay.
That's right.
What's the worst that can happen?
That's right.
If you get a no, you're in the same boat as if you didn't try. Years and years ago, a financial planner made a comment to me, your first house is free. And that sort of sounds weird, but then he explained it. You're going to be paying rent, so pay a mortgage. 30 years, it'll be done. Your house will be worth 30 years, probably 4 times as much. Your payment stayed the same. It's not what happened to your rent.
Right. Rent is going to go up for sure. Cool. One last question is this: you might have just answered it, but what's the best piece of real estate advice that you've ever heard that you would want everyone to know? Maybe just finance. Buy some real estate.
Real estate is, for most people, the biggest builder of wealth in their entire life. So not participating is not seeing any of that equity building over the course of your lifetime. If you buy it, hold on to it.
Love it. What do you think?
Yeah, sounds good.
What's the best advice you've heard?
The best advice that I've heard, or that I actually believe, really, in real estate is, if you're a seller, to counter, you get the highest possible price by countering, and
Negotiating.
Yeah, I think there's kind of a superstition or a reluctance to negotiate, especially during times like this. So I think, on our seller side, they're they very much at the end of the transaction look at the situation and think, wow, like, I just never thought that would happen. And, what you really want to do on the seller side is really determine out of, the maybe couple buyers who have expressed interest, who really wants to buy your house, like who really wants to buy it. Because lots of people might kind of like it,
Sure.
but who's really the person who's going to
fallen in love with it?
Who's going to stand up in the
Right.
group and say, no, it's me. This is my house, right? And there's, that's the person you want to be in contract with. And it's our job to like find that one person in the group. So it's a fascinating expedition, but the results have been just so much more beneficial in the end. And I, at the beginning of my career, like most agents, I think there's been a hesitancy to go there. But in the last 10 years or so, it's just been really a game changer. And our entire process, when it's done, that sort of way, is so smooth and happy in the end. Yeah.
That's really good advice.
Yeah.
This could be a whole segment. All of the truisms in real estate that everybody believes and aren't true.
I love it. We should get together again and do it. So if anyone watching, listening, wants to get a hold of you, wants more
Right.
information about the markets that you clearly know a ton about, where can they find you?
Yep. So website is mycitycountry.com, and then, connect at mycitycountry.com, and then 415-407-8796.
Cool.
Telephone
We'll put that
number.
in the show notes. Make sure if anyone
Yeah.
has any questions about the Russian River area that they are reaching out to you.
Cool.
Really appreciate you
I love
being
talking
here.
real estate.
I do too.
Call me.
Cool. Right on. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Stay up to date with Bay Area real estate. Hit subscribe now if you haven't already. Did you enjoy this episode? We love reviews in the Apple Podcasts app. We'll read yours on the show. This is By the Bay.